They thought she was just another washed-up officer. They were wrong. The sun had barely risen over Fort Kingsley when Commander Naomi Trent laced up her boots for what she thought would be just another day in uniform. 20 years of service had trained her to anticipate every variable except this. She had done everything right. From desert deployments to classified missions, Naomi had earned every stripe on her shoulder the hard way. Her ribbons weren't decorations. They were proof that when others fell apart, she held the line. That morning, her routine was precise, almost sacred, a 5-mile run at dawn, followed by an intel briefing she was scheduled to lead. Her body was tired from weeks of fragmented sleep, but her pace was steady, measured. The base was waking up as usual, cadets shouting cadence, staff hurrying to posts, coffee brewing in the mess hall. As she finished her run and wiped her brow, her assistant, Lieutenant Park, approached with a concerned look. "Commander Trent, you're requested in Colonel Dennison's office. Immediately. General McCall is there too." Naomi froze. General McCall didn't do casual visits. His presence meant something serious. Still dripping with sweat, she nodded and moved out, adrenaline rising. Her boots echoed down the hallway of the command center. When she entered the office, no one stood to greet her. Colonel Dennison didn't even look up from his desk. "Commander," he said flatly, at ease. Naomi stood straight anyway. There were 3 men in the room: Dennison, McCall, and someone she didn't recognize. Civilian, gray suit, cold eyes. "We'll get right to it," Dennison continued, sliding a sealed folder across the desk. "You are hereby relieved of command, effective immediately. These are your separation papers." Her fingers barely touched the envelope. "Excuse me? This decision came from higher up. Your clearance is revoked. You have until 1800 hours to vacate the base. No appeals, no explanation." Naomi's voice didn't tremble, but it was sharp. "Sir, with all due respect, 20 years. Don't I deserve to know what this is about?" General McCall finally spoke. "You're entitled to nothing. This is a national security matter." The civilian stepped forward, glancing at his watch like she was wasting his time. "You'll surrender your weapon and ID now." In silence, Naomi removed her badge and sidearm, placing them on the desk with robotic calm. Her heart raced, her jaw locked, her entire body screamed for an answer, but she gave them nothing. "That'll be all," McCall said. "Miss Trent?" The way he emphasized "Miss" felt like a slap across the face. Outside, the air felt heavier than before. The wind had picked up. Rain was starting to fall. By the time Naomi returned to her quarters, word had spread like wildfire. She passed soldiers she'd mentored, trained, bled beside, and now they looked away, like she was toxic. Some found reasons to turn around mid-hallway. Others pretended they didn't see her. A few whispered behind their palms. In her room, she moved like a machine. Uniforms into duffel, medals, documents, a photo of her old team in Kandahar. She stared at one face longer than the rest, Captain Elias Monroe, KIA. Also, they said, that mission had never sat right with her. She flagged it again last week. Too many intel inconsistencies. Maybe that was her mistake. As she zipped the bag shut, a knock came. It was Master Sergeant Ramirez, her NCO for 5 years. He didn't step inside. He didn't salute. "I heard," he said, voice low. Naomi looked him straight in the eye. "They said it's classified." Ramirez hesitated. "Your file was pulled from above DC level. Not normal protocol." She frowned. "Espionage?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Watch your back, Commander." He left without another word. By noon, she was standing at the gate. No transport, no escort, just her duffel and a dishonorable discharge stamp that wasn't earned but permanently etched into her record. The guard on duty, someone she'd once written a letter of recommendation for, cut her military ID in half, without even looking up. "Procedure," he muttered. And that was it. Naomi Trent, decorated officer, gone in the span of a morning, stripped of everything without a trial, an answer, or a shred of dignity. She took a breath and walked. 7 miles to the nearest town. 7 miles to nowhere. And then, something changed. The wind shifted, the sky above began to tremble, and from behind the trees, a sound rose deep, rhythmic, unmistakable. Rotor blades. A Blackhawk helicopter. No markings. Flying low. Coming straight for her. The MPs at the gate scrambled. Alarms blared. Radios crackled with panic. That was no scheduled flight. Naomi stopped walking. She dropped her bag and turned. Because that helicopter? It wasn't flying for the base. It was flying for her. The Blackhawk didn't slow down as it approached. It hovered just beyond the base perimeter outside the fence line, not on military protocol. No call sign, no tail number, completely unmarked. Security forces on the base panicked. Uniformed MPs scrambled into formation. Rifles were drawn. Sirens screamed across the parade grounds like the start of a war. Naomi stood frozen near the fence, unsure whether she was the target or the reason it was there. Then she saw him. Through the rain-streaked glass of the cockpit, the pilot turned slightly. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. Captain Elias Monroe. Dead. Buried. Funeral with full honors 3 years ago. She had seen his body, zipped in a black bag. Or had she? The helicopter remained in place, ignoring every protocol. Base command trucks screeched to a halt near the gate. Colonel Dennison jumped out, scanning the aircraft with binoculars. His face twisted in confusion, then anger, then something like fear. Inside the Blackhawk, the side door slid open. A figure in tactical gear leaned out and pointed a small device toward the base. A directional transmitter. Naomi watched as General McCall's secure phone suddenly rang. He answered. Whatever he heard made the color drain from his face. Authenticate, he barked into the phone. He paused. Confirmed. That one word shifted everything. The MPs lowered their weapons. Colonel Dennison turned and looked straight at Naomi. His jaw clenched. He said something she couldn't hear over the wind and the rotor thunder, but she recognized the look. It was no longer disgust. It was regret. One of the MPs unlocked a narrow maintenance gate. The same young corporal who had cut her ID in half earlier stepped forward, his expression pale. "Commander," he stammered, eyes wide, you're requested to board." She stepped through the open gate, duffel still in hand, boots soaked through with rain and betrayal. McCall didn't speak. He just watched as Naomi walked toward the waiting helicopter. Then, unexpectedly, he did something no one saw coming. He saluted her. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't required. She had no rank anymore. But that gesture spoke volumes. Naomi returned the salute. She climbed aboard the Blackhawk. The tactical figure inside reached out, took her hand, and pulled her in. The door slammed shut behind her. As they lifted off, Fort Kingsley shrank below, lights flickering through sheets of rain. Naomi braced herself, one hand gripping a safety strap, the other still gripping her past. Across from her sat the impossible. Elias Monroe, alive and well, helmet off now, watching her with guarded intensity. "You're supposed to be dead," she said, shouting over the noise. He reached into a compartment and pulled out a headset. "Put this on. We don't have much time." Naomi slipped on the headset. The roar dulled. The tension didn't. "I saw your funeral, Elias. I folded the flag they gave your sister." He nodded. "You saw a funeral, but not a body. That wasn't me. It had to look real." "Why?" "Because someone inside our own command structure got my team killed in Syria. I was the only one who made it out. Barely." Naomi's pulse kicked up. "You faked your death to investigate?" "Project Lazarus," he said. "Off books. Deep intel. I've been working with Langley for the past 3 years, tracking who leaked those coordinates, who got us killed. You almost blew the whole thing open last week, when you flagged those same anomalies in the Syrian reports." She frowned. "That's why they kicked me out? Because I noticed something didn't match?" Elias gave a bitter laugh. "You noticed too much, and they noticed you noticing." A new voice crackled in her earpiece. "Commander Trent, good to have you aboard." She stiffened. "Colonel Bennett?" The man who had once overseen joint CIA military ops during her deployments. "I'm coordinating this operation from Langley. Apologies for the rough extraction." Naomi clenched her jaw. "You let them discharge me, humiliate me." "We had to. The moment you raised concerns, we knew they'd come after you. We didn't know how fast. That discharge gave us legal cover to get you out." "And now what?" "There's a secure facility 30 minutes from here," Bennett continued. "We'll explain everything there, but you need to know your life was in danger. People inside Fort Kingsley wanted you silenced before you put the last pieces together." Naomi looked out the window. Rain clouds were starting to thin. The sun was trying to break through. "What is this really about?" she asked. Elias glanced at her, then turned his screen toward her. On it were internal comms messages between high-ranking officers. Some she knew, some she didn't. The text made her skin crawl. She's getting too close. Pull her clearance. Discredit and isolate. Push her out before she digs deeper. Monroe was a mistake. We can't afford another. Naomi's breath caught. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overreach. This was a cover-up. We don't know how high it goes, Elias said quietly. But someone inside Fort Kingsley has been selling intelligence, and they used your discharge to protect their network. Colonel Bennett's voice came back online. Commander, we're asking you to join Project Lazarus, not as a victim, as an operator. You know the command structure, you know how they think, and now you're off the grid. That makes you dangerous, to them. Naomi looked at Monroe, at the screen, at her own reflection in the window. The woman they kicked out wasn't gone. She'd just been reassigned. And this time, she wasn't coming to serve. She was coming to expose the rot at the core, because they thought she'd stay down. But Naomi Trent never stayed down. Night fell hard over the Georgia pinewoods as the convoy moved in silence. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt charged like a wire stretched too tight. Inside a nondescript facility camouflaged as an abandoned industrial site, Naomi Trent stood in full tactical gear again for the first time in hours, or maybe years. Her hair was pulled tight in a regulation bun. Her sidearm was holstered. Her mind was razor-sharp. She was no longer a disgraced ex-commander. She was the lead officer on a mission to infiltrate Fort Kingsley, the very base that had thrown her out like trash that same morning. Colonel Bennett, now in person, briefed the room. The intelligence Naomi flagged was a test, a breadcrumb trail. We planted it to see who would panic, and panic they did. Within 6 hours of her report, we intercepted messages confirming a coordinated data purge scheduled for 0600 tomorrow. That's how scared they are. The screen shifted to display blueprints of Fort Kingsley's secure server facility deep beneath the communications wing. Naomi stepped forward. They're wiping everything that links General McCall to the intelligence leaks. We have less than 10 hours to get inside, retrieve the data, and get out before it's gone forever. A skeptical voice rang out across the room. It was Agent Simone Torres, tall, analytical, seasoned. She stood with arms crossed. With respect, Commander, you were dishonorably discharged this morning. That makes you radioactive. Are we sure this isn't a trap? Naomi didn't flinch. You don't have to trust me. Trust the mission. She turned to the team of 6 operators waiting behind Torres faces she didn't recognize, but eyes that read every movement she made. I was inside Fort Kingsley's upper command. I know the habits, blind spots, and override systems. I also know they won't expect me back, especially not tonight. Colonel Bennett backed her. The dismissal this morning wasn't real. It was theater, but the danger is, and we're running out of time. Naomi nodded. We go in at 0200. Torres and I will infiltrate through a maintenance tunnel that bypasses the main entry points. Monroe's team will stage a diversion at the east perimeter. And the server room's biometric lock? Another operative asked. Naomi brought up a secondary screen. Fort Kingsley uses emergency override protocols. I know the daily algorithm system it resets at midnight. Our inside asset will send the code the moment it updates. Who's the asset? Torres asked. Naomi looked her straight in the eye. Master Sergeant Miguel Ramirez. The same man who had quietly warned her earlier that day. At precisely 0200 hours, the plan moved. Monroe's team set off controlled charges on the base's fuel depot perimeter, perfectly timed diversion. Alarms blared. Floodlights turned. Every available guard moved east. Naomi and Torres slid through a drainage culvert in full black tactical gear, crawling through mud and filth for over a quarter mile beneath the base they once walked openly. No salute, no respect, just shadows and silence. Tunnel ends here, Torres whispered. They bypassed a minor security panel and emerged into a janitor's closet inside the communications wing. Naomi tapped her earpiece. We're inside. Copy, Bennett's voice responded. Diversion is pulling most of the base's eastern security. You're clear to proceed. They moved swiftly and silently down the dim corridors, timing their movements with camera sweeps. Naomi's memory of the layout was flawless. When they reached the server room door, Torres leaned in. Now we just need the code. A tense moment passed. Then Monroe's voice came through. Asset delivers. Echo, November, 7, 4, Tango, Alpha, 3, 9. Naomi entered the code. The panel blinked. Green light. They were in. The server room was ice cold and humming with life. Dozens of tall black server racks glowed in rows, quietly safeguarding the data that could take down a decorated general and maybe more. Torres got to work with her decryption device, connecting directly to server cluster B7. Extracting comms logs, fund transfers, and access logs, she murmured. Naomi kept watch near the door, hand resting on her weapon. That's when the lights suddenly flared to full brightness, and a voice filled the room. "Commander Trent, I must say, I'm disappointed, but not surprised." Naomi's heart dropped. General McCall. His voice came through the base intercom like a ghost. "I accelerated the purge. You're too late." Torres cursed. "He's overriding the system. I'm losing data." Naomi lunged to the control console. Her fingers moved in a blur. "I used to run drills on this system. I know its weak points." Torres stared. "You're stalling the purge?" "Buying us 3 minutes. Make them count." Outside the door, the sound of boots thundered down the hall. The general's voice came again, colder now. "You don't understand what you're interrupting. This operation, this network, it's above you." Naomi shouted back without hesitation. "Number, what I understand is betrayal, and I'm going to drag it into the light." Then, a deafening crash. The server room door jolted under impact. It wouldn't hold much longer. "Files secured," Torres yelled. "We have what we need." Naomi disconnected the device, snapped it into a secure case, and keyed her mic. "Command, package secured. Initiating exfil." Bennett answered. "Extraction point is the north shaft. Meet Monroe's team. Move fast." Naomi and Torres dashed through the emergency exit corridor as the door behind them gave way. Shouts echoed down the hall. Naomi's boots hit the metal ladder of the maintenance shaft as Monroe and 2 operatives guided them in. "Let's move," he barked. "Full lockdown in 60 seconds." They raced down tunnels soaked in adrenaline and mud, surfacing half a mile outside the base, where a van waited, engine hot, back doors open. As they slammed the doors shut, Naomi looked back. Fort Kingsley, her home of 2 decades, shrank in the distance. Once a symbol of pride, now a monument to betrayal. And she wasn't running anymore. She was coming back for the truth. The tactical van cut through back roads like a phantom, headlights off, tires humming against wet asphalt. Inside, no one spoke. Not yet. The tension wasn't fear, it was aftermath. Naomi sat across from Agent Torres, clutching the data drive that held the future of multiple careers and possibly the safety of the country. When they arrived back at the Lazarus facility, the team moved fast. Operators downloaded the encrypted files to the main tactical screen. One by one, the proof came into focus. Encrypted communication logs between General McCall and foreign operatives, secret financial transfers hidden in shell accounts overseas, confidential troop positions and undercover identities sold to the highest bidder. Colonel Bennett stared at the data, grim-faced. "This isn't just intelligence leaks. This is systemic infiltration." Torres crossed her arms, visibly shaken. "How many operations have been compromised because of this?" Naomi stepped forward, her voice steady. "Too many, but now we stop it." Monroe turned from the screen. "We've also identified a code named the Chairman. Whoever's pulling the strings isn't McCall. He's just another pawn." Bennett's secure line rang. He answered, nodded, and looked at Naomi. "That was the director. The president's been briefed. Special forces teams are en route to detain McCall and every name on this list. You've done what no internal review or agency probe could, Commander. You exposed it from the inside." Naomi didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just asked, "What happens now?" Bennett reached into a case on the table and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This." Naomi opened it slowly. Her hands, so used to field reports and orders, now trembled just slightly. Inside, full reinstatement papers. All records of her dishonorable discharge permanently erased. A retroactive promotion. "As far as official record goes," Bennett said quietly, "you were on a classified assignment this whole time." Naomi exhaled, deeply. For the first time since that morning, she felt seen. But there was more. "The director wants to meet you," Bennett added. "Oh, 800. He has a new command in mind, something off-grid, a team built on trust, built on truth." Monroe smiled faintly. "They're calling it Phoenix." Rising from the ashes, right? Naomi's jaw set. We don't rise because we're unburned. We rise because we're not done. She stepped out onto the landing pad as dawn broke across the Georgia woods. The same Blackhawk that had plucked her from disgrace was waiting rotors silent, doors open. But now, it wasn't a rescue bird. It was hers. And she wasn't escaping anymore. She was returning as the reckoning. Back inside, the Lazarus team watched her board the chopper in silence. Some nodded, some saluted. Even Torres, once skeptical, gave a slow nod of respect. As the Blackhawk lifted into the sky, Naomi stared out at the horizon. She thought of Ramirez, the man who risked everything to send her that code. She thought of Monroe, who faked his own death to find the truth. And she thought of all the soldiers still inside that broken system, hoping someone out there still fought for what's right. When the helicopter hit cruising altitude, Monroe leaned toward her. "Commander?" She looked at him. "You did it." Naomi didn't answer right away. She turned toward the cockpit window and whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Number, we did what the uniform is supposed to mean." Later that day, after the arrests were made and the files secured, news would leak. Whispers would spread across the military community like wildfire. "She's back. She was never guilty. She saved more than we knew." Colonel McCall would be detained in silence, unable to explain how the woman he thought he buried had returned with truth in her hands. The corporal at Fort Kingsley, the same one who had sliced her ID in half, would stare in disbelief as her name lit up again on the active duty roster. But Naomi, she wouldn't return for a speech. She wouldn't demand an apology. Because she didn't need recognition to stand tall. She already had. Greatness doesn't walk in shouting. It moves with quiet certainty, and lets the truth speak louder than medals ever could. If someone had told her the system would betray her, she would have believed it. But if they told her she'd become the one to fix it, that she had to become on her own. Naomi Trent never raised her voice. She just raised the standard.